Hi, this is Mr. Eric Little, Smyrna High School, Spanish 1. And today we're going to talk about the culture of time in Latin America and how time is used and how it functions. In another video, you're going to learn about how to tell time in Spanish. But this one's just as important. So, one thing that's really interesting about time in Latin America versus the United States is that in the United States, we think of time as happening at specific times. It sounds funny how you say it. Like 6:15, 6:20, 6:25. We measure time in individual minutes, sometimes seconds, and each time is different than the next in our sort of daily living. If a TV show is scheduled to come on at 8 o'clock and it doesn't start till 8:05, we think something is wrong. If a bus were to arrive at noon, but it was scheduled for 11:45, we call it late. That's because we are what we call monochronic in our culture. Monochronic means that whatever time it is exactly the different time from every other time. So 11:57 is not quite 12 o'clock. Because in our mentality, we think of time as having one exact moment. But in Latin America, time is understood differently. Time is not thought of as a moment, but rather sort of a range. So for example, if you were to hang out with your friends and say we're going to get together at 7 o'clock, people might not arrive until 7:30 or 7:45. And they wouldn't be considered late. Sometimes you might have a train or a bus that has a schedule for, let's say, 3:30, but it hasn't gotten there until 3:45. You wouldn't call that late in Latin America. That's about right. 3:30, 3:40, what's the big difference? So that is because Latin America is what we call polychronic. That is, time is not thought of as instants, but rather a range. Time flows differently in the mentality of people in Latin America, but it's still measured the same. We do read clocks very much the same way, and we tell time in similar manners, but we're going to talk about some of that in case you've forgotten. So in Latin America, just like in North America, we have what we call AM and PM. So that is everything before noon is AM, ante meridian, and PM is anything afternoon, post-meridian. Midnight is 12 a.m. exactly, and all the way through 11:59 a.m., right before noon. Noon is 12 p.m., and then it goes all the way until 11:59 p.m., right before midnight. We use clocks. We use digital clocks mostly nowadays in Latin America, just like we do here. But we also have what is called analog clock, and that is the kind of clock you see here. With the minute and hour hand. Some of our students may not be fully accustomed to using an analog clock. What you need to remember is that the longer hand points to the minute. This is the minute hand, it's the one that's longer. And then the hour hand is the one that is short. And it's going to point at or a little bit past the hour that it's measuring. So this clock behind me, the minutes are 30, and the hour is 8. The line is a little bit past the 8, but hasn't quite gotten to 9. So it's 8:30 in that clock. Also, in Spanish, just like in English, we use different expressions to describe time. That's not exact in terms of minutes. So for example, I might say, it's 1:15 o'clock. That means it's 15 minutes past, or it is 1:15. I could say 2:30, which would be 2:30. I could also say 1/4 until, or 1/4 till. So right now it's 1/4 till 11, which means it's 10:45. And so we use those expressions in English just like we will in Spanish when we watch the Spanish video. Now, something that you'll see in small areas of our American culture, but that is more widespread in Latin America, is something we call the 24-hour clock, which you see right here. That is, the hour begins at 0 and goes to 23. because the 0th hour is kind of the first one. And this is used in scheduling, particularly when times are advertised for like business hours, events, that kind of thing, plane schedules, etc. In our culture, you'll see this a lot in the military. It's sometimes called military time. In fact, it's even spoken out loud the way that it is in the military. So for example, this is 12:30 in the morning, a.m., and we would call it 130 hours. You don't have to know how to tell military time the way that they actually say it, but you will need to be familiar the fact that we use 24-hour clocks in Latin America a lot. So the second one is 6 o'clock in the morning. This one, you see 13:15. What you do is just subtract 12 in your mind. That might take a second, but if you took 12 hours away, that would be 1:15 in the afternoon. This one, 2100 hours, subtract 12 and you're left with 9. So this is 9 p.m. And this is 11:59 p.m. So you see, when it gets to 23 and 59, the next minute would be 0000, which is midnight. So what you need to be aware of is that this exists and is frequently used in like everyday life in Latin America. Again, particularly when events are scheduled. Like if you went to study abroad in Colombia, or if you were checking out a restaurant's operating hours in Bolivia, it's likely to be advertised with a 24-hour clock. There's something else that we have to deal with, not just in Latin America, but anywhere in the world. And that is, the sun is not up for everyone in the world at the same time, because the earth, right, goes around the sun. And the earth rotates, it spins, which means that it is noon somewhere on earth at all times, pretty much. But if it's noon on one side of the planet, it's nighttime on the other. And so therefore, human beings created what we call time zones. Time zones mean that maybe here in Tennessee, it's 4 o'clock, but in New York, it's 5 o'clock. In California, it's 2 o'clock. In England, it's night. And that's because that's where the sun's position is. We are in the central time zone here. In the United States, we have 4 major time zones in like the lower 48. We have Eastern, Central, Mountain, and Pacific. So we're in the second time zone from the coast, from the East Coast. Latin America experiences a variety of time zones as well, but because Latin America is pretty well south of the United States, for the most part in Latin America, it's going to be more or less the same kinds of zones and jumps in time that we experience in North America. The thing that we do experience very differently is daylight savings time. So you know, jump forward, fall back. So in the spring, we add an hour on like a Saturday night or a Sunday night. We add an hour based on the fact that the days are getting longer, and the idea is that people would consume less energy if we did this protocol. And then in the fall, we would gain that hour again. We would fall back. Well, most countries in the world do this if they're not too close to the equator being the very middle of the globe. See, those countries don't need to jump forward and fall back because they pretty much have 12 hours of daylight every day because they're not far from the equator. See, every spot on Earth is going to have the same amount of daylight as every other. It's just going to be sometimes more places will have more of it in the summer and other places will have less of it in winter. Daylight savings makes sense in that all of the northern hemisphere would experience it at the same time because we're all going to experience summer at the same time, like June, July, August. But because of the Earth's tilt, that means the southern hemisphere experiences winter when we experience summer. So we're going to spring forward right around the time that they're falling back. which means that we're going to be 2 hours off on our time zone based on time of year. And then when we fall back, they're going to spring forward. So what time is it in Argentina or Colombia, Chile, or Mexico? Depends on what hemisphere they're in, depends on their time zone, and depends on what time of year it is based on daylight savings time. My recommendation is you Google it. Well, this is Time and Culture in Latin America. See you again next time.